This week's episode is all about past life regressions. It's one of my favorites. I recorded it way back in January and just was in a super vulnerable mood. And every time I listen to edit it, I usually end up crying. So some of the things I talk about is what a past life regression is, why someone would want to get one, the different ways that you can experience a past life regression, and then I share 3 of my own regressions and the lessons that I have learned from them. It's really a heart-opening, beautiful storytelling sort of episode, and I really, really know that you will enjoy it. Last thing, if you've been really enjoying my show, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That means so much to me that you have returned to listen. And I'm asking you to please consider leaving me your review or rating and sharing it with somebody, because I am very much in the growth phase of this podcast and I want to keep it going. So your feedback means everything in this growth process. It'll only take a minute or two, and the value that it will bring is more than you could know. All right, that's it. Kick back, relax, enjoy the show. You are listening to the School of Whispers podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, and this is my space to get real, open, and weird about my life experiences as a psychic, medium, energy healer, and student of Chinese medicine. On the show, I'll be sharing my healing journey and the concepts I've learned along the way, and I'll be having guests on talking about the same sort of thing. I am so happy you're here, and I hope this show leaves you feeling inspired and empowered to learn how to listen to the whispers of your own body and spirit. Let's get into the show. Hello. Welcome to the podcast. If you are here for the first time, I am Stephanie. I'm your host. The topic of this podcast is past life regressions. I want to talk about what they are. I want to talk about why they can be valuable, and I guess the different ways we can do it. And then I want to tell you about 3 of my regressions that I wrote down because they're super interesting, and I think the lessons that I took from them might be valuable or at least interesting to you. So I live my life under the impression that we are all souls who reside in a body, a human body, and we are here to learn and balance karmic energy. And when we pass, our souls leave this body. We go back on up to source, to home base, God, heaven, goddess, whatever you want to call it. And our soul has a couple of moments of just reprisal and healing. And actually, I did experience this in a regression. I'll tell you this later. I don't think that what I experience is a blanket statement for how we all experience life, because perspective is everything. But again, it was super interesting and you might take some value in it. So after this point of resting, rejuvenation, feeling so much love, our soul decides, okay, time to go back in the pool. And so we sit down with our guides, our past lives, our ancestors, maybe other souls that we have karmic energy that needs to be balanced with. And we sort of write down contracts for the next life. And because we have free will, these contracts aren't exactly, what's that word? Necessary? Obligatory. You don't have to go through them. You can be faced with them in your human form and just kind of be like, nope, can't be bothered. It's just a matter of, will you remember and will you agree, I guess, with this contract? But nonetheless, contracts are written. We create a personality. We create a little bit of a story, and then we return. And unfortunately, we forget everything, but that's the beauty of it. We forget so that we can really feel the beauty, the power of remembering. And so with this, whole, you could call it a story. It's my belief system, I guess. Reading the book, Many Lives, Many Masters, really helped me sort of formulate this idea of what happens after we pass on. And I've read a couple of other books that have helped me resonate and create my own explanation. Take it or leave it with everything I have to say. If it resonates and it's for you, if it doesn't, you can say no thank you. And I do that with everything that I learn about. I take what I like and I leave what I don't. So a past life regression is when you are in this present life in a state of meditation or hypnosis, and you are sort of thrust back into that life, and you can smell and feel and see all the details of that old life, and it's like you're there. And you have this feeling of familiarity to it. That's how I know, because before I had a practitioner walk me through a past life, and when I had first learned about past life regressions, I had learned that it was through hypnosis, and that is one of the many forms. I have actually been with a practitioner. We went through a past life regression through a distal acupuncture session. And it was a combination of using a doll as a proxy for my body, and my practitioner opened my chakra centers, and I think we use a little bit of, the way that this is all possible is through Qigong, which is a form of ancient Chinese energetic healing. But you can do it in a lot of forms, and the first time I've actually been through a regression was alone by myself in meditation. So there's many forms. But how I know that this is a past life regression is the sense of familiarity. Like I've been there before. And when you're in the regression, you can see faces who physically look totally different, but energetically will hold a similar stamp to someone that you know in this current life. I've seen my mom, my sisters, my husband, my professor, my mentors in my past lives. And that's just kind of, because when I'm in meditation, I see a whole lot of stuff. I see a whole lot of visions. Some of them are just for the sake of a story, a learning. Some of it is maybe it's the future, maybe it's the past, but how I know that it's my own regression is when it feels familiar. So why are they valuable? Why would we want to even do this? In my experience, when I've experienced a past life regression, it's been incredibly healing. We don't necessarily reach our highest form in our past life. We don't necessarily learn all the lessons that there are to learn and fulfill all the contracts that our soul had written up in our past lives. And that's partly why we cycle back. We cycle back into reincarnation so that we can balance the karmic energy we hold with ourselves, with others, maybe this whole entire planet, this whole matrix that we're in. And maybe we come back because we just like it so much. Honestly, the thought of me being in my last life makes me feel kind of sad because I love Earth school so much. I hear a lot of people talk about how this is just painful and it sucks. And yeah, it is painful. It is suck. There's some really hard moments, some real bullshit moments. But I really, really, really love this planet. I love the smells. I love the tastes. I love the plants and the animals and just really everything about it. But that's, and I'll say this a lot, I think, in every episode. I freaking love Earth. But anyways, that's answering the question, why do we come back? But really, so in these regressions, I am faced with faces that help me understand sort of the mechanics around our relationships, especially the really hard ones in this present life. When I see those faces in my past life regressions, it is so healing for our present day relationship, because it helps me understand why we struggle in the way that we do. And it helped me understand, what did I forget to learn? What was a lesson that I forgot to bring with me in this life? And it's like, with the snap of karmic energetic fingers, I am in a state of remembering. And in my present day, I'm able to observe. It's like, I feel if I'm in conflict with a certain person, I feel that energetic timestamp. And all of a sudden I'm back in that memory again of that past life. And I remember, oh, yes. This is the lesson that I need to learn. This is the lesson I need to carry with me. And everything changes from there on so many levels. And it's also a great way to understand yourself, understand any deep fears or comforts or phobias or things that resonate with you in this life. The more I'm talking, the more dizzy and lightheaded I'm feeling. So I'm going to take a snack break, and then I will return to, I guess I already did tell you about the different ways that you can go in a regression. You can go through it alone, like I have. You can go through it with another through hypnosis, through acupuncture that's distal, or in person through Qigong energy healing. And I am sure there are other ways, but those are the ones that I know of right now. If you know of any others, please reach out. I'm sure I'll post about this on my Instagram or Facebook, so feel free to comment and let me know any of the other ways, or you can send me an email at schoolofwhispers@gmail.com. You can find me through my website, you can find me through email, Facebook, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. All right, snack time. All right, I am back. Actually ended up eating a full-blown meal and it really made me think about probably the most unpopular opinion that I have on spirituality is, and this sort of realization that having a super restrictive diet, in my opinion and experience, has nothing to do with being extra spiritual. You don't have to be vegan or fasted to be a more spiritual being. You are already a spiritual being. In fact, what I've learned in my years of a journey with food is, for me, the two most important things is, one, having a blessed, loving relationship with your food. Blessing it while you're cooking, connecting with it, really thinking about when you're shopping, thinking about what you're buying and making sure that it resonates in your body as a feeling, and also blessing before you eat. And I'll do a whole topic on this, but making sure that you're eating according to the energetic balances within your body. And I'm talking about the balance of the yin, that feminine, nourishing, cooling energy of the moon, of night, of blood, and then also the yang or yang, and we're taught in school to call it the yang, and that is the warming, fiery, energetic, moving, bursting sort of energy, and really being able to tune in to where my energy lies through my, deep intuition, my thoughts and my feelings, but also how I'm looking physically on my skin, on my tongue, in my hair, on, the parts of my body that when something's wrong, like when there's something wrong, where it manifests the most on your body, and sort of working from there. And it's not really something we're born knowing. It's actually something you have to learn. But anyways, that's if you're curious on the topic, which I'm diving into now, of how you can possibly have the sight by yourself and be in a state of meditation and go through a past life regression, then start there. Start with your relationship with food. Start with understanding your intuition and the whispers of your body. All right, so starting with my first past life regression, I was not feeling well. I was having a very personal medical issue, and I was sitting on my balcony, and if I'm not in the state that I want to be in to get into a deep meditation, and this was kind of like in the beginning of any sort of psychic awakening for me, but whenever I'm not in a great state to begin with, I use breath work to help me get there. So, and I've posted about this on my Instagram. I believe I called it psychedelic breath work. And so I will do 2 rounds of 20 Wim Hof style breaths. And if you don't know what that is, go ahead, look it up. You can look it up through my Instagram or just YouTube Wim Hof, and you'll get an idea. So I'll do 20 of inhales and exhales, rounds of those twice. And it's really that holding of my breath where the first round I'm usually saying, I am here, and I'm feeling myself really arrive within my body. You need to be within your body before you can leave it. I feel like that might be a universal truth here. But again, you need to be within your body, and ideally in a loving state, so that you can actually leave it. And then after that, I don't count how many times I do it, but I do Bhastrika breath of fire, which is a kind of a yogic kundalini or based sort of breathing. And I do this until I start to feel my mind quiet down. My monkey mind chatter is finally coming to an end. And when I feel that silence, I repeat about 5, maybe if I really need it, 10 times. I release control and surrender to the flow of love that will heal me. And then usually after doing that for quite a bit, my brain is in a beautiful theta waveform. And then I get to be in that state of silence. And I sometimes set intentions. Usually it's just for the higher good of everyone involved, or I intend to let go of everything and anything that is or isn't Stephanie in this lifetime. I choose to return to source, whatever it is. Or, most of the time I just allow myself to drift. But anyway, so I was going through a very uncomfortable time in my body, and I did that breath work and I felt so good. But also I was hitting an acupuncture point in my palm. So if you make a loose fist, check out where your pinky finger lands. It's going to be between your pinky and your ring finger, in that little space in between. And that has a specific effect that I was looking for. And so I was pulsing as I was breathing, just kind of jabbing my finger into that acupuncture point in my palm. It's on the heart channel, and the heart channel has a really, really strong effect on your emotions and your Shen, which is the part of your spirit. So in Chinese medicine, they like to break down the spirit into, I think 4 or 5 different forms. We have the Po, the Shen, the Hun, the Chur, and the Yi. This one, the Shen, is about just baseline how your spiritual being perceives the world around you. And it also, the heart channel is just, they call it the emperor. And the heart is just really responsible for the majority of your emotional states and for your spirit as a whole. Anyway, hitting that point, and then I'm in that silence. I finish my breath and my eyes are closed, and all of a sudden I see this distant memory of me just walking through the jungle. Step, 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 step. And this is actually since I was young, since really the first time I went to Costa Rica, which is, I was 7 or 8 years old. And Costa Rica has just been it when I returned, yeah, I guess when my spirit returned there in this life, I realized that I had been homesick my whole life for a place I had never known. And since then, since I was 8 years old, it's just been a prerogative of mine to return to Costa Rica as many times as possible. And so to soothe myself in my youth and until this point, I would have this image of me walking through the jungle. And all of a sudden that memory returned to me. So I felt this sense of familiarity, but then I'm getting more and more images around me, and I'm getting this feeling, and I'm no longer Stephanie, but I'm still me, but I'm actually in this body of a man, of a man living in the jungle. And I don't know what year it is. I have the feeling that I was a man in an ancient time, part of an indigenous culture of people, an indigenous tribe that lived in the jungles of maybe it was Central America, maybe it was Costa Rica, maybe it was South America. I'm not sure. And so I'm walking, and I'm all of a sudden remembering that this was a time in my life where I was running away from my old life. I was running away from a tragedy. And once I feel into what that tragedy was, everything comes to me. So I am just a regular guy living in a village, and this is my past life regression. All right, so regular guy living in a village, and I have a wife and 2 children. Well, when I looked at the face of my wife, turns out that it was actually the soul stamp of my mom in this lifetime. And my mom and I are so close. I have been obsessed with her since the day I was born. If anyone else held me, I was not happy about it. If I saw her holding another baby, my mom tells me I had this deep voice when I was a baby. And when she would carry a baby that wasn't me, I would look at her and go, "Mommy, that's not your baby. That's not your baby." and when we would play, I don't know if you're familiar with the game of life. It's a board game where you go through little life phases. And I remember at one point you collect a little token and they're like, congratulations, you get married. You collect a token from this point, and there's a little car that's the little totem that goes around the board game. And you could add an extra peg to it. So I had a pink peg, and I remember they would hand me a blue peg, and I'd be like, "No." Baby Steph would be so upset. I'd say, "No, I'm not getting married. I'm living with mommy. I married mommy, and I'm living with her forever." So just to give you an idea of, I adore my mom. And the thing is too, though, as I've grown older and gone through therapy, I've come to understand that as beautiful as our love and our connection and our friendship and mother and daughter relationship is, there's also a lot of hard stuff to our relationship. I have lived a lot of my life feeling deeply responsible for her happiness and well-being. If there has been any point where I've seen my mom struggle, even if it's as a child, I'm looking at my mom struggling about something that as with my child brain and experience, I can't fully understand. I have felt this deep sadness and almost like this self-disdain, like feeling responsible, like, Steph, you failed yourself, you failed your mom because you couldn't do what you had promised to do, which is to keep her safe and happy. And I've only really healed from this, or really acknowledged this. I think this regression really helped me heal from this, but I never acknowledged this until the summer of 2020. So I was 24 when I had realized this. And so back to this past life regression, it helped me kind of understand this deep connection and love and responsibility I have for my mom, because in this past life, I'm a man of an ancient tribe, an ancient culture, and my life partner who I chose was the soul of my mom. And so as the memories kind of go through, and in a past life regression, you're not going through everyday life in like a sort of mundane sort of way. You're kind of being thrown into the most potent, powerful memories of that lifetime. And so I realized that my mom, or the soul of my mom, my wife in this lifetime, had died of some sort of sickness, and I had training in medicine. I think that was my vocation in that life, was to be a medicine man, and I couldn't save her. And so she died, and I felt deeply responsible. I felt like I had failed her and myself, and I hated myself, and I just lost all will to live. And so I find myself leaving my family, my family, my friends, my children, and just going into the jungle and walking. And I'm realizing that I'm walking away from everything, hoping that I would meet death. And so as I am just days of walking in this state of grief and despair and self-loathing, I am exhausted and a little out of it. And who knows, maybe it was the food deprivation in this life that helped me connect to a spiritual power of higher up. Who knows? But I remember stopping and kind of resting my body against a tree. And then I see a little pale yellow butterfly. And I see it land on a flower that's just kind of like almost frozen in this midway of a bloom. And this butterfly kind of just sits with me. It doesn't move. And it just looks so pure and so beautiful. And I just feel so much love while sitting, like having this little being sit with me. And then all of a sudden, I look around me and I notice that I had happened to stop at a place where there's a beautiful pool of water. There's these tumbling vines and these beautiful wild passion flowers, and there's a small waterfall trickling down, and the sun is shining in just the right way where the water has this iridescent sparkle to it. And I just fall to my knees. Oh, I'm getting emotional saying this. I fall to my knees and I start sobbing. And in that moment, I realize that I wanted to forgive myself, and I wanted to live. I remembered how beautiful this life is, and with great pain comes the ability to appreciate the, seemingly mundane, powerful beauty around me. And so from that moment, I decided to return. I guess it was a sort of spiritual awakening for me. And so I returned to my village, I returned to my children, and I saw this face of a man who was my close friend. He wasn't my brother, but he had this feeling of being my brother. I know that he wasn't blood, but when I saw his face, it was the face of my twin sister in this lifetime. And then I saw another face, and it was somebody who I hunted with often, and it was the face of my older sister in this lifetime. And they helped me heal. Gabby and Nicole, if you're listening, I love you so, so much, and thank you. Whew. Okay. So this is past life number 1 that I went through, and it's helped me understand that I'm not responsible for the life and the well-being of those who I love around me. I'm really not. And they're their own soul on their own life path. And it also helped me remember that just because I've lost someone in this life, it doesn't mean I'm never going to see them again. How lucky that for my entire life up to this point, I got to be the daughter of the soul of someone I loved so much that she was my life partner for a short time. And now she's my mom for however long she wants. Her soul chose to be my mom. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So the next one is a past life in ancient Egypt. So this was a couple of months later, maybe a month or so later after this first one. And I was playing a lot with astral projection, really just playing with everything that was a psychicness. And it was really before I was giving people readings. And so I am doing my breath work. I get into a deep state of meditation. And this time my intention was, another thing that I use are brain waves. I use an app called Ananda, Ananda. And it's so great because it has a whole list of types of brainwaves that you can use. So I use it to help me study. I use it sometimes to help me sleep, fall asleep, or have a power nap, or wake up in the morning. But also there's options for deep meditation or intuition. And those are the two that I'll use when I want to get into a deeper state of meditation. So I am in meditation with the intention of practicing astral projection, and the intention that I had set was really just like a calling. Anyone who serves the greater good and is of a vibration of my highest self, of love, please come and help me out a little. Help me learn. And I see, first I feel this kind of energy trickling in. And then I see this image of this beautiful man. And so a friend of mine asked me kind of about the mechanics of seeing, of I don't know what kind of is it clairvoyance? I don't know. But just a lot of people actually have asked me like about the mechanics of seeing, and I gotta be honest, I think it's something that I was just kind of born being able to do easily. I have a pretty wild imagination. I loved drawing as a kid. I love creating, and I love stories. I love writing. And I think by just flexing that sort of creative muscle of closing my eyes and seeing what's in front of me so that I can create it in this 3D world I love drawing too, so has really helped me kind of flex this psychic muscle. So maybe that could help you, just closing your eyes and maybe having a blank piece of paper in front of you and just starting from there, just drawing what you see. And when I close my eyes and these things happen, first I see just colors coming in, and I don't try to control anything that I see. I just let the colors sort of come together and create a form. And then all of a sudden, I'm no longer seeing with my eyes. I'm no longer really focusing on these colors. I'm just kind of almost stepping back further with my consciousness into deeper parts of my brain, deeper parts of my consciousness that have these formed images. And it's not really something I physically see with my eyes. It's more of something that I'm using not all my senses, really, my feeling senses and my seeing senses to create an image of, if that makes sense. So anyway, so I see this beautiful man. He's got this dark skin that's really smooth and silky, and he has these high cheekbones and this milky smooth skin, and his eyes are these multiple colors of greens and browns and yellow, and he has his head shaved and almost like ash darkening around like coal eyeliner underneath his eyes, or was it on top? It was both. It was like how you would picture like an Egyptian person, I guess, doing their eye makeup. And so I see him and I'm like, "You are beautiful." And he looks at me and smiles back and he said, "Well, so are you." And when I meet a being, I like to really lean in so that I can make sure that I can feel their vibration. Because when you lean in with love and appreciation and compassion towards a being that you come across, if they aren't of that higher vibration, they're going to lean away from you. They're not going to lean back in towards you. So I lean in towards him and I feel this deep familiarity and love. And I look at him and I go, "Are you me? Am I you?" And he smiles and says, "Yeah, you got it. You got it. This is you in a past life." And I can't remember at what point he gives me his name, but it's Nefaris Arcane. And after this, I looked up what arcane means, and it means known and understood by very few, mysterious, secret, obscure, esoteric. And this totally describes him. So at first, I'm not really interested in a past life regression. I'm here to work in the astral realm. And so I'm sitting on my balcony and he says, "All right, let's astral project down to the pool down below." So we're there and I'm like, I want to splash some water. I want to affect the physical world from the astral world. And it's not working. And he kind of tells me to take a step back and to just focus on touching, the mere sensation of touch. I think he said, I wrote this down and I have this in front of me because I'm eventually going to read this story that I wrote, this regression that I wrote. Oh, yes, he says it's like you're trying to move from multiplication to trigonometry when you're trying to, so just focus on touch. So I remember touching the tiles of the wall of the pool and then just feeling chills all through my body. And then while I'm doing this, a mosquito bites me in my human body. And I jump back to my human body and I, slap the bug and I itch the spot and I hear his voice saying, hey, come on back, Steph. And we come on back and he goes, this is your first task I want you to focus on. Focusing within the astral plane. He told me to observe the bug bite and to not let it pull me out of my consciousness. And then he told me very confidently that I'm actually able to push out the venom of the mosquito with my mind. And I was like, are you sure? And he was pretty sure. And since then, I have done this. And, I'm going to give, I always like to say, because I am skeptical. So, like, is this placebo effect? It might be. But does it work for me? Absolutely. So if you're new to this and you want, and you need kind of a step-by-step guide. So step 1, I think I said, it was food. I guess step 2 is working on breath work and getting your brain into a state of non-being. And number 3, if you are getting into the astral plane, focus within this plane. Observe distractions. Do not allow them to pull you out. I think it's called, in the yogic tradition, vipassana. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And it's observation. It's all about that. And I realized I was doing psychic readings by this point because through doing my readings, I learned how to connect cords, energetic cords. And so we're in this room where I have been to before in the astral plane. It's kind of like a simulation room where anything and everything I want to create, I can create. So we're sitting in this room, we're playing around, we're discussing the astral plane, we're discussing telepathy and channeling, and we decide to connect our third eye chakras and our heart cords. And then this has put me into my next past life regression. It started with seeing palm fronds and then just seeing energetic wisps of white and gold. After a while, I start seeing the images sort of accumulate, and I see myself being dressed in beautiful, and I'm Nefaris's body. So I'm dressed in these beautiful, blessed, everything I wear is blessed. So I'm wearing this beautiful, blessed jewelry and just kind of minimal clothing, just light linens. And I'm surrounded by humans who are serving me with love and admiration. After a while, I kind of realize I'm in ancient Egypt in a palace type of home that I feel so familiar with because guess what? This is a familiar memory. This specific palace is actually a place that I often go to before I go to sleep. Looking back, again, since I was young. And so I am watching my past life regression and I'm observing myself. I'm starting my day with getting dressed and eating plums and grains and other delicious food. And I get this impression that everything that I'm touching is blessed. So again, I'm surrounded by a community who are my love and who love me and respect me. But I'm not a prince or a pharaoh. I was actually a royal seer. I had a gift of all the clairs and psychic abilities, including seeing the future and healing. So I see myself having, in particular, a special role with pregnant women. So I had this role of communicating with unborn souls and reading the stars for their future progenitors. And what's interesting is at this certain point in Nephiros' life, I get this impression that I have very little interest in healing. And when Stephanie kind of realized this, I was really surprised because I am obsessed with healing. Healing myself, healing others, physically, emotionally, spiritually. It's just what really drives me in this life. And, I say to Nefaris, like, there's just nothing better than healing others. And he goes, yeah, you have a point, but my younger self would really disagree with you if, in fact, I kind of saw it to be boring. So as I'm continuing to observe this life, I'm understanding two things. One, nourishing my body is essential to strengthening this gift. And two, community support is also essential. So at one point, I'm sort of searching for familiar faces, and I'm searching for Mana, who's my husband in this life, this current Stephanie life. And so I'm looking around for him, but Nefaris, tells me, hey, that's later. Don't jump the gun now. Focus with me. So I actually realized that Nefaris has many lovers, and it's men and women. And I was very desired, and I had a lot of love for every lover that I had spent time with. But I was also aware, and I'm realizing this is kind of where my vanity in this life comes from. Like, I'm just really into beauty and looking beautiful myself and being desired by others. And in this past life, this kind of awareness of the desires and of it sort of got to my head, and it began to taint the purity of my soul. And this starts to lead to the trauma of this life. So I did something that I found to be terrible and unforgivable. I had slept with the wife and who happened to be the greatest love of my closest friend. So something gave off the impression that this really close friend was a pharaoh or a prince, somebody who was higher ranking than me. And I, like an idiot, got his wife pregnant. And he never, that I know of, my friend, never found this out. So I lived this whole life of Nephiros with this lie, and it ate me up, and it gave me this creeping feeling of unworthiness and guilt and shame. And at one point, I think the guilt kind of convinced me that I loved this woman. I knew she loved me, and we met often in secret while she was pregnant. And it was usually about, and when we would meet up, she would tell me how we'd live out our days with our unborn child and blah, blah, and we'd leave the pharaoh, we'd go, and, it would just be us and blah, blah, blah. And none of it felt right to me. And with that intuition, I knew that this wasn't right. I didn't love her. This wasn't supposed to be my path. So, and in Stephanie observing this, was feeling all this immensity of shame and grief here. And I was grieving the loss of the purity of my soul, I guess the freedom of not having to live under a lie, losing the love and respect I have with my best friend, and also knowing that I'm going to have to leave this life that I've built around me in Egypt. Okay, so Nephiros, I had stayed until the baby was born because I just wanted to make sure it would be okay. And I remember making the conscious decision to not look into this baby's life and to not communicate with it, which really ate me up too. And so instead of fessing up, and which would probably mean accepting my fate of further heartbreak, public shame, persecution, and probably death, I decided to run away. I had seen a vision of a life living a lot more humbly, but still alive, and it was in another place. And I think it was somewhere in the Middle East, somewhere like Jordan. I'm not sure, but I remember seeing the soul of Mana. And so this is where he comes in. So Mana was actually a man, and in this past life, I remember this is a time where, from my understanding, there was no shame or really label around homosexuality. I kind of just ran fluidly through my sexuality in this life, and so Mana was this man who ended up being the love of my life and who I would spend the rest of my days with. And in my vision, I had watched myself grow old with him, and I saw that I had died first. And I never, so I see this vision, and so I just run away. I escape. I leave my home with making sure I left no trace, and I meet him there, and he's just really humble man living in a kind of like this square clay type structure in a small city. And so in this past life regression, I realized that even though I was with him, I just could never shake the shame and guilt that as I lived life on, it was just this underwriting baseline shame and guilt that I always felt. But of course, it over time did grow less acute as our love for each other healed my heart. And interestingly enough, out of this shame and guilt, I decided to dedicate the rest of my life to healing others. And it was like I was always trying to make up for this sense of lack of self-worth. And I'm wondering now if I do struggle with a feeling of unworthiness and like almost like I have to prove myself. And shame and guilt are definitely low vibrational emotions that I still have to work through. And I'm also wondering if, really, and while I don't believe anymore that I am unworthy and that I am a shameful, guilty person, I do not believe that anymore as Stephanie in this life. I'm wondering if those beliefs contributed to my early death. So as I'm wondering this, in my regression, I hear Nefaris telling Stephanie that no lie is ever worth living out to death. It steals essence and vitality from the soul and the body. The truth is always worth it because it keeps your vibration rising and, most importantly, your soul free. And at this moment, I see myself in this life die. And as I'm watching this soul mist off of Nefaris's body, I asked him to show me more. I wanted to see what abilities I had. And so I'm kind of thrust further back in his life, kind of back towards the beginning in Egypt. And I was young and beautiful again. And I was in a dark temple in a space alone. I wore more ceremonial clothing. It was dyed with indigo blues and threaded with gold, and it had this sheer muslin sort of feeling to it. I was sitting on the floor, and I had all these blessed and sacred items around me. And in this temple space, I am sitting surrounded by unlit candles. And with my mind, I lit every single one of these candles, which, mind blown. And And then there was this one particularly larger candle in front of me that had the strongest flame, and you could really see all the colors of the flame. And I kind of reach for this flame and I hold it in my palms unburnt. I hold it for a moment, and then I kind of reach behind me and I grab an item. It's kind of like a red rose, like it's not a rose, but it had like soft petals, this type of flower. And then I kind of lit it with the flame, and I feel this giddy warmth and pulsing power through my body. And with my hands, I kind of crush this flower, and I let in it with this crush and this heat. It's like this oil seeps down from my hands, which I allow to flow into a clay jar in front of me. And I don't know what this was for, but actually, in this lifetime, a couple weeks before recording this podcast, I was listening to it was an Aubrey Marcus podcast with a man named Matthias De Stefano, and he was talking about a past life in Egypt, and I forget what the name for Egypt was at the time, but he was saying that they used these red flower. He gave the name of the flower that they used for spiritual ceremonies, and when I looked up the name of it, it was the exact same red flower that I saw in this vision, this regression. And I looked it up, and I believe it was a poppy flower. Anyways, back to this life in Egypt. So I'm sitting in this space in meditation, and as I'm watching, I'm noticing that there's something going on. It's like my aura is starting to change colors and start to pulse around me. And so I asked Nefaris what was going on, and Nefaris said, I'm speaking with the gods, and you can already do this today. And I knew exactly what he meant. And then I heard Nefaris think, and this is where I might cry again. I don't know, but it was just this okay. So Nefaris says to me, Stephanie, I give you the gift of worthiness. I give you the gift of sight. I give you the gift of truth. And with this gift especially comes the gift of freedom. May you never spend a life running from the truth. Your responsibility is to maintain this truth and share it with the world around you. Spread your capacity for love and allow it to grow, never allowing lies or shame to steal anything from your being. And then I kind of just zone out from that point. And yeah, that's my second life regression. And I just want to take a moment and say, well, I guess thank you to the soul of my husband to start Mana, because he has healed me he has helped me heal so much in this present life. And I saw how he had helped me in this past life, just loving me for who I was, even though I had this baseline self-disdain again, this shame and guilt. And it didn't matter to him what my past was. And thank you, Nefaris. We have met again in the astral plane, and I'm so grateful for all the teaching, and I'm grateful for the life you lived of running from the truth, so that I can know in this life that running from the truth is never a way to live. The truth is freedom. And I'm telling you this right now. The truth will always set you free. All right. My last life. So this was a point. So I've mentioned this in earlier episodes that water. Wow, I'm realizing I hit an hour here. Okay, so I'm realizing in this. Okay, so I've told you this before. Water is highly conductive. So I love taking baths and getting into meditation. And so I lit a candle And I am listening to brainwaves, taking a bath, and I'm doing a meditation where I'm just focusing on the candle flame. And this is it's called, in yogic tradition, it's called Tritaka, which is just cleansing your mind through the observation of one single item. It is super healing for your spiritual being and for your brain, and in turn for your body, to be able to focus your mind on one thing and then let your mind go. The mind, mental chatter, the running thoughts, they can create pathology and keep you from center in so many ways. Anyways, so I'm watching this candle and I hear in my mind, it begins and ends by candlelight. So the year is 1556. I'm in Scotland, I believe, and my name is Siobhan, and which is just so relevant, after I looked up this name, and this name means directly translates to God is gracious. So my name is Siobhan Richards, and I am the older sister to a young girl named Mira, who, when I see her face, I realize is my twin sister, Gabby. So we live alone together in a small town, and my parents had died. And apparently I had predicted my mother's death. I had the gift of foresight and often connected, or I guess precognition. And I often connected with Source through gardening and convening with animals, creating medicinal tinctures and drinks, cleaning. Cleaning was super spiritual, and that was a huge lesson for me, because in this life, Stephanie really finds cleaning so boring, but really cleaning is such a spiritual act. And I loved drawing and dancing. I especially loved to dance, but I had this really awkward body, and I wasn't comfortable doing it anywhere else but in the comfort of my own home, where I knew I could not be seen. And that's been a reoccurring fear that's really healed from looking at this past life. This fear of being seen. Anyways, so I wasn't pretty. My face was scarred from pox that I had when I was younger, and I had a habit of picking, which I've carried on into this life, unfortunately. So my hair was mousy brown. It was kind of frizzy and thin. I was tall and gangly. I had bad posture because I always wanted to look smaller than I was, and I was shy, and I only felt close to my little sister Mira, whom I adored. And Mira was just this little precious feminine little being. She had this rosy rosebud cheeks, this milky skin, full blonde hair, and these angelic curls, and she was my little angel. And as she grew up, she just became even more beautiful, and I felt this really, our parents weren't around, so I felt this really this protectiveness around her. I believe I needed to shield her from the big bad world, who refused to accept me, and they were very, very open to accepting her. And looking back, I think that kind of got to me subconsciously. So unfortunately, this over control eventually created disdain within Mira against me. She wanted to see the world, and I wanted to keep the world away. The boys in town flocked to her, and when she was just 13 or 14, she was just already looked like a woman, and she already had a few proposals. And as her sole guardian, I rejected them all. I told her she was too young, and besides, no one was good enough for her. And about a year goes by from these first proposals, and I'm just continuing this, you're rejected, you're not good enough. And Mira is already tired of our little shit cottage on the outside of town. She thinks she loves me, but she thinks I'm weird. And as she's growing older, she realizes that other people didn't grow up the way that she did. They grew up with mothers and a sense of quote unquote normalcy, but really, what is normal? But her disdain starts to grow and deepen into this bitterness. And she started spending more in time, like as every, teenager looks at their guardian at that age, they're just more embarrassed than anything from their parent or guardian. And so she spends more time in town with the ladies, doing things like sewing and gossiping and whatnot. Things that I, and in this life, still don't really like to do, and I don't feel comfortable while doing. And Mira knew this, that Siobhan did not feel comfortable in this setting. She knew I would stay far away. So as she spends more time with the woman in town, she starts to vent more and more about me. And she gets the sympathy that she's searching for from these women. And it's almost like creates this little bug within her, which only wants more. So she's emboldened and hungry for more sympathy and more judgment towards, who she believes is to be her enemy. And she starts to tell them about my strange practices, how I talked to plants and animals, the way I danced, how my dreams and visions often came true. And before Mira knew it, the woman's emotions around her moved from being entertained to being like just furious, saying things as, how could the most beautiful child have been raised by like a devil worshipping witch? And by now, Mira, she kind of realized like, oh shit, this has gone way too far. And she tried to talk them down, but somebody asked, like, are you defending a witch? Like, did she pull you in too on her side? Are you on the devil's side too? And this quickly shut her up. And they decided from there that Mira would not be returning home to me that night. So meanwhile, Siobhan is home, and I just finished cleaning. I was making dinner, and because Mira was late, as usual, I decided to take advantage of my time alone, and I just started, humming and moving and dancing by the candlelight, moving to the inner songs of my heart, calling upon my God, my past loved ones, and ancestors. And what I didn't know was that while I was doing this, the women in town were standing outside my window spying on me. And they were already kind of all like riled up and fearful and I guess excited to spy on a witch. And they were seeing my, normally gawky dancing body kind of moving with, I guess, this glowing otherworldly grace and creating shadows on the wall. And they were just totally triggered by this, and they all ran into town. They grabbed the men, and they also kind of built up their own stories to that, how I grew hooves and had called upon shadow spirits, and they were watching these shadows demons dance on the walls, and just created more fear, more fury. So the men had Mira return to our home so that I was not suspecting anything bad. And so we eat dinner, we go to sleep, and when I was asleep, the men came in through the door. They woke me up by grabbing me by the hair and told me I was arrested for being a witch. I remember just kind of being like, what? Like, what are you guys talking about? Like, just really groggy. And I remember they started mocking me and laughing at me, but I could hear the terror in their laughter, and this, I guess, this feeling of like, oh, we're in a witch's home, we're not entirely safe here. So they quickly moved me out of this home and threw me in a little prison cell. And of course, I was cold and afraid. And at this point, Stephanie, who's been watching this, feels so much sadness and empathy that I step in. And I don't really know how I did this, but I did it. And so my soul kind of steps into Siobhan's energetic awareness. And I'm just giving her comfort. I'm just giving her hugs and love. And I'm just doing my best to keep her warm. And what was interesting is she wasn't surprised to feel me. So this sort of visitation and sensation wasn't uncommon for her. And I told her everything that I had seen, what had happened, kind of got her up to date with the whole Mira kind of talking to the women and then all of them watching me and blah, blah, blah. And what was so beautiful is Siobhan did not feel any anger or disdain. If anything, she immediately felt heartbroken for Mira because I had told her how in this present life, my twin has suffered a lot. And with, and I'm not going to dive into too much detail with her sufferings. But, there's been abuse and there's been self-denial and sadness and grief and guilt and shame between the two of us and for her. And Siobhan kind of hearing what the soul of her little Mira, her little sister's soul is having to go through in this future life, she was just like, no, unacceptable. Like, she should not have to suffer for lifetimes. Like, despite Mira's betrayal, Siobhan her love never wavered for her sister. So the next morning, they take me, Siobhan, to trial in church. And present me, Steph, is like, are you fucking kidding me? A church for a trial? Like, bullshit. And Siobhan was sad, but she was really peaceful and already seemed to have this veil of death upon her, this veil of acceptance, and this, like, almost like this otherworldliness. Like, her witchiness almost was just magnified from these experiences in a way. So it was like she was physically present, but her soul was just moving in and out of her body and in and out of timelines. So the trial goes on. Mira gives her account of her sister's strange ways in front of the congregation. And she even told the crowd about how Siobhan had predicted their mother's death. And looking back, I think Mira sort of blamed Siobhan for this death and for, like, stealing any sort of sense of normalcy from her life. So then I am kind of back in my body in this past life regression, Siobhan, and I see the priest, who's just like a young, sort of dry man with a kind face, and he asked me if I had anything to say for myself. And again, like I said, this was the first time I was kind of felt present in the room. And I looked up at the priest and I felt this strange attraction to him. And funnily enough, it was Mana. Mana showed up in my life, the past life regression again. And I think it's very relevant because in this present life, all my psychic weirdness, especially in the beginning, he's found super triggering. And I remember jokingly before this regression saying, like, I swear Mana must have burned me in a past life. And well, he didn't burn me, and actually he showed me as much compassion as he could in this past life. He was definitely a bit of an instrument in all of this. Okay, so Siobhan, she's being asked, what do you have to say for yourself? And I turn to Mira and I say, Mira, I forgive you. Mira, I don't want you to feel any guilt for any of this. I want you to live your life enjoying your sovereignty while also feeling my love for you. And of course, this triggered a lot of emotions in Mira, and I sensed it was emotions of guilt, anger, shame, and regret. And I remember watching her, just this bitterness kind of seeping out of her, and she laughs and she goes, you forgive me? I did nothing. You took Mother and you took my life. you're getting what you deserve. And of course her words stung, and I just sort of looked at her, and I felt ashamed and guilty for how she felt, for feeling like I kind of took her life and all the possibilities that could have been with it away from her. This feeling of responsibility for the happiness and well-being of those who I love. Big theme for me. And during her speech, I just immediately started picking my face, and my face was just bleeding. I had these sores, and with my head down, I mumbled, I mumbled, "I love you beyond this life." And only those of us in the front of the room, which was me, Mira, and the priest, could really hear this. And so the priest, he reflected on this exchange between us, and his, I guess, connection with his God was just, he just felt like a woman of the devil couldn't be capable of this level of love and compassion. But he looked at the room and could feel just the rising wave of anger, and them being moved by the beautiful Mira, who's, her replying to her wretched, bleeding, bloody, like sore covered, dirty, frizzy haired sister. And the crowd's energy was just kept on rising. They started to jeer at me, and they clearly, they wanted blood. So the priest considered the consequences of any just of absolving me. He considered absolving me of my accusations, but he knew that this crowd was a mob by this point, and they would want to blame somebody. So with a heavy heart, he silenced the crowd and told them, "All right, this woman's guilty of witchcraft, and I would be sentenced to death by being buried alive," because to him, this seemed like a much more humane and non-humiliating death versus being burned at the stake. And in hindsight, I think he's right. So I was placed in a coffin, and I remember finding a candle and a match. And a part of me just knew that the priest had put it there for me so that I didn't have to die in complete darkness. And then I remembered, yeah, right. It ended by candlelight. And then Stephanie kind of wakes up. And I touched on, as I was telling the story, why what the lessons I learned. So I learned that my picking, I tend to pick my skin, my face, and when I'm anxious, and I'm realizing it's a form of coping that I developed in past lives. And I also understand why I have had a lot of this fear, and I've had a lot of dream experiences of my twin sister turning against me and having others turn against me as well. And just this sort of humiliation that I've often felt. And I also understand that, so we're twins, but I've just always felt this sort of this responsibility and this protectiveness for Gabby that just never served our relationship. And it was like Siobhan didn't believe that Mira was capable of taking care of herself or making her own decisions. And it's not exactly because I didn't trust her, but it was because I was just blinded by taking on this protective caregiver role. And this was really wrong, because all beings should be allowed the freedom to make their own decisions. We all deserve independence and to be encouraged to trust our own intuition, which I did not do as Siobhan in that life. And I also understand why I've grown up just feeling super apprehensive about others seeing me dance in my fullest expression, which I have totally shaken off by now. I've also understood why I feel as an other, especially when I'm around, you're what it means, I guess, to be a typical woman. I've just never been a normal, quote unquote woman. And that's totally fine. And I also understand why this sort of precognition and connection with source, and well, this precognition is just like something I've always felt apprehensive about. I have it in my readings and I've always just like not wanted to share, but the guides would tell me like, no, you are not going on with this reading if you are not sharing this information. And I totally understand why I feel that way. But also I'm understanding why my just like this deep connection I've always felt with plants and animals and food and creating a clean, comforting environment and dance, why they feel so good, but have also felt like little sources of guilt within me, like a sense of apprehension and self-judgment, as if I should be doing something that's more normal or quote unquote valuable. And I'll go through this little prayer, and I'm going to share it with you at the end of my past lives. And so that maybe if you end up finding yourself in a past life regression and you're faced with these heavy, deep traumas, you can bring yourself comfort. And this is where I'm going to end the podcast here. I release myself of all of these wounds. I release the trauma of this past life, the patterns I formed, and the karma I accrued. I choose to embody the lessons I learned, and also to embody the moments I felt truly myself in this past life. And for myself, I'm going to say out loud, I honor the strong, loving, unique, and connected woman that you were, Siobhan. Thank you so much for listening. If you have this far, I can't believe I'm at an hour and 25 minutes. You go, Steph. I appreciate you so much for being here with me, for sitting and being willing to learn through my perspective. And just a reminder that just because it's true to me, it doesn't mean it has to necessarily be true to you. I encourage you to seek your own truth, because that is your deepest inner knowing. If you want to connect, you can find me on Instagram as Steef, Steef. You can find me on Facebook as, I might add that in end notes or end credits because I can't remember what my Facebook thing is. But my name on Facebook is Stephanie Wright. Or you can find me on my website, schoolofwhispers.com, or send me an email at schoolofwhispers@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.